Good afternoon, everybody. To those of you in North America, Canada, good evening to those of you in Europe. I know I have a couple of people in my network that are watching this despite it being Friday evening. So I guess I owe a couple of you something for giving up your Friday night on this as well. But welcome to this edition of the Packard Network Live, where I present great transformational leaders across all different kinds of industries, most of which are not bankers. That's one of my purpose objectives, so that I can talk to people outside of my realm of knowledge. So today I'm really pleased that I have Nicole Rand coming to us from California in the United States. And Nicole, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Brett.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And I'm going to kind of toot your horn a little bit here and give a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to leave some of the technical stuff to our conversation. But I've been really excited. Nicole and I met here on LinkedIn, and she has a fascinating background, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it right now. And before I dive into that, those of you that are tuning in live, I'll kind of check on you and 5 or 10 minutes from now, kind of as Nicole and I are talking about some different things. So get warmed up. Please put in, if you're watching live, just put in where you're watching from, and I'll be sure to acknowledge you. And if you have any questions for either Nicole or myself, doesn't really matter. Throw it up to us, and we will do our very best to answer. Well, I'll commit that we will answer it, and we can talk further about it on dialogue. Last administrative issue for those of you watching this on replay, please do tee up any questions or comments that you have as you're watching this, and we'll be sure to respond to those as well. We're pretty active, both of us, on the platform as well, and love the engagement as well. And I'm sure you're really going to all want to follow Nicole, especially after hearing her amazing career journey and her ambitions for doing her part to make this a better world. And so we'll talk a bit about that today, and as well as some other things as well, including hot topics and important topics like burnout and how to manage that. So we're going to kind of get into some of that stuff in a few minutes. But Nicole is the president and founder of Nicole Rand Professional Services, where she's an expert coach in interview skills, and she works with clients to build a successful resume. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about an awesome post that she just made today about how to really go beyond just your resume. Or for those of you, most of my networks in Asia, I think I may have told you that, Nicole, but you call it a CV. So I know resume is a foreign word there, but whether CV, resume, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe Nicole's post today and why it's important as an example of how she helps people beyond just putting down what they are all about on a piece of paper, because there's much more to it than that as well. And whether it's a toy or an iPhone, doesn't matter, but they're great concepts that you'll get from Nicole. But that's an example of what she does there. She helps each one of her clients is different. She acknowledges that, which I love, because we're all built differently, and we all have different things that inspire, motivate, and the way that we express ourselves are all different as well. And that's I've always believed that that one of the best creations that God gave humans is the ability to have diverse set of humans, right? Where they can do different things and that aspire to do different things, and that people are not the same as well. And so Nicole acknowledges that in her proposition, and she helps her clients find a unique voice for their needs. Okay, so it's not like a canned product, right? In terms of it that way. So we'll talk a bit about that, but she's great. And her definition of success is your success. And I love that. And again, that'll come through here as well. And that really ranks up there with a lot of global firms that are world-class firms, that it doesn't matter if you're heading into a recession, which we might be now, we might not be. I can't predict that with certainty, but it doesn't matter the world is still going to spin, and businesses that actually define their success as the success of their clients, their customers, and their employees as well. Those are the winning companies, and the losing companies and the losing leaders are those that don't really value how people feel about their end product or the way that they deliver it. So Nicole is really her focus is on helping people do that, and she doesn't consider herself a success until they're successful, which I think is just awesome. We're going to talk about the OnlyTen program, but I'm not going to spill the beans on that one. I'm going to let Nicole talk about that, but it's a very unique program. We'll get into that as well. And just briefly, she has marketing experience. I don't have this part written down. Marketing experience, sales experience, career planning experience. I think you've also worked on the front line in a hospital with clinical staff. And if I get this wrong, you can correct me, but I think you also worked on a project that reduced infections in a clinic or something along those lines, which was kind of a meaningful, life-saving type of thing. You know, a lot of people go in for a medical procedure and a lot of things are taken for granted, that the patient just wants to get in, get out, and get done what they have to do. But if you're dealing with, you know, infections and, you know, issues there, that environment has to be just right. And so Nicole understands that as well, and how that can impact people's health. So I'm going to take a sip of water, Nicole, and say welcome to the program again, and give you an opportunity to kind of, you know, Brett Packard guy sometimes kind of gets off the mark a little bit. So if I said anything that you'd like to correct, this is the chance to do it.
Oh, yes. Well, thanks, Brett.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you said everything accurately. I will tell you, yes, ever since working on the surgical site infection program, I have never looked at germs the same way again. You know, you just don't realize how much we touch on a daily basis and how much we move around, because in the OR, you know, there's very, very, very specific procedures on how to do things. Even from, there's a reason, you know, you see in hospital shows, right? Doctors always walk around like this, right? It's not because they're trying to pretend to be a forklift. It's actually because, of course, they've just washed their hands, mind you, for like a full minute, but any residual germs need to drip off away from their hands. And so, wow. I mean, I won't go too deep into that. That's a whole nother topic and ball of wax, but it just, yeah, that was quite a learning experience that has always stayed with me in my daily life.
I'll bet it was. And maybe that helped. Did that help you and your family when COVID struck? The fact that you knew a lot about that?
Well, definitely, yes, right. And then I'm always trying to teach my son, who is just inconvenienced by washing his hands, why he should wash his hands. I said, you know, I'm like, you don't want to put your poop and pee in your mouth, because that's what you're doing. If you don't wash your hands, you come out of the bathroom and go eat something, you know. So. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a big challenge around. I think a lot of people have become educated on how a lot of that stuff works. If the pandemic wouldn't have hit, there'd be really no idea. And that probably accounts for why some of the influenza cases and other things have declined a bit since that happened, that people are becoming more conscious about that. So that's
absolutely
great. Yeah, that's good. So again, for those of you on LinkedIn Live, please tee up some information here. We have Michael Woods is here. So Michael, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here. We have Eric Zamet is here as well. So as more of you join, please do tee up in the I'm showing there's a lot more than 2 of you to join, by the way. Is what the little thing in the upper left does show. So anyway, let me know if you want to engage, but I'm sure we're going to talk about a few things that you're going to want to discuss with Nicole and I. Nicole, when you finished high school, and now in 2022, did you ever dream or imagine or draw out what you're doing now? Is this something that you aspired to do way back then, or did it did it kind of happen as things progressed in your life? I always like to ask people that question.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, absolutely not, because when I was graduating high school, I was on the road to become a doctor. And of course, fun fact about me is that my maiden name was actually doctor, just like the word, that's how you spelled it. So that was always fun when I worked in the hospital. Anyway, but no, I was on the road to become a doctor, and just things didn't pan out the way you expect them to, right? And I think for good reason, because you never really end up generally on the road you thought you were going to, right? You have this plan, and then life has a different plan for you. And a big part of what I teach my clients, I'm really big about talking about your soul and your soul need. And there's what our logic brain says, right? What all the externals, what society says we should do, and that's what we generally focus on. And then there is really what your soul wants to do. And I think really I've been on this journey with my soul kind of trying to be like, no, I want to go over here, and me being like, no, we're going to go over here,
Right.
And so finally I just kind of stepped aside and really acknowledged what it is I wanted to do, which again wasn't, my soul wasn't like, I want to do, career coaching, right? That wasn't specifically my thing. But I do love helping people. I love the freedom that it gives me. I love being able to work with so many different people across the globe. And of course, being a perpetual learner, I'm always learning in my process too. We're never done learning. So the short answer is no. I am nowhere where I thought I would be. I would have never imagined, but I am extremely happy. So,
I mean, what a relevant time coming out of still in the pandemic era economy, likely to be headed into another challenging economy over the next year or so, if you look at what some experts are saying about that, to actually help people find jobs, right? And then in the U.S., you've got the Great Resignation, the kind of has been probably trending before the pandemic, and then people just really got fed up. And so a lot of activity in the space that you're involved with. I mean, that must be exciting for you to be kind of in the middle of the action.
Yeah, it definitely is, because we are in a big time of change, right? Everybody who kind of operates in some professional space has heard about the Great Resignation. And that has been, I've talked about this before, and that has been very interesting to me, because I feel like it's a lot of me's coming out, realizing they're like, you know what, that's it. I'm done with this, grinding away at the stone all day, 9 to 5, right? I'm here on this earth to do more than just pay bills, right? And I don't know if you've heard that before, but I've seen that a lot. I'm not just here to pay bills. And our values are changing with the different generations. Values are changing. Needing a lot of things and stuff isn't necessary as much as it is the desire to have freedom to live and experience life. And so that's really shaping the way that people are approaching their careers and jobs. It's all about that value system. And so I don't know how deep you want to get into that. Again, how much time do you have, right?
Well, it's because you're passionate about it. And that's what I love about what you do, and how you help people, and how you actually, I mean, your proposition, I said this in the intro, the fact that you measure your success as your client's success. And I think that's great, because it's easy to say, but there's not a lot of small businesses, medium-sized businesses that actually measure themselves that way, right? It's measured, that old P&L is out there, and we know, you and I well know, that the big companies, the Wall Street firms as well, it's all about profits, right? So, and which is one of the things that's triggered the Great Resignation. So there's a lot of, factors out there, but I think that's a winning part of your proposition, and I think it's great. Tell us about OnlyTen really quick before we get into some other topics.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So everything I do, right, is a passion project, so to speak, right? Because I'm very, like you said, passionate about what I talk about and what I teach clients. And I stand by what I say because I have had the experience on the other side, having been in HR and recruiting. And more importantly, I was in mass recruiting. So I dealt with hundreds of resumes and applicants on, a monthly basis, and staffing for all different industries and all different position types. So I have that experience. I also have the experience in my own personal journey. So I'm trying to help prevent people from running their head into the wall like I did for so long, right? It's like with children, right? You're like, child, I've been there, I've done that, I know what happens next, please don't do that, right? They go and do it anyway. But if I can save somebody. But as far as OnlyTen is concerned, this is really something that I'm very excited about. It's going to build over long term, but it's all about bringing together, I would say like-minded, but it's like energy people, right? I am a marketer's nightmare, and I understand that because I have no niche, I have no avatar, right? I don't have here's your problem, here's what I'm going to do to help you, and here's what you're going to be when I'm done, right? Which these are the standard marketing things. I don't have that. And so it's all about collecting together people of a certain energy, people who are not only visionaries, but executors as well, people who have been driven to do more since they were a single digit individual, right? People who will always keep striving to do more for as long as they live, right? It's not a momentary thing. And primarily individuals who are looking to make an impact on today and leave a legacy for tomorrow. So my goal with OnlyTen is to bring these individuals together. And I call it a society. And I'll tell you, Brett, I was really, really hesitant to call it a society, but something kept saying, just use it, just say that term, because it's about a way of life, right? We have so much going on in our lives. We have so many things we sign up for, so many things we're going to be involved with. This is about really being engaged with one another, coming together to support one another, regardless of who you are, where you are, what stage of life you're in. If you're somebody who's a perpetual student of life and is always looking to do more, to grow, to be greater, and leave that impact, this is for you. That's what it's all about. And so I provide the teaching. I will, guest speakers will, I'll have events. Like I said, it's for people who are continually learning, and we're here to help support you on that journey, as well as your other members. Now, I do say it's an exclusive membership, because I don't want to fall into the pitfalls of like a networking group where it's like, just bring in as many people who are willing to pay the fee and grow and grow and grow. Because let's be honest, if you're part of a network, you never meet everybody in your network, right? You've got the billionaires or the high level executives or whatever, and you're like, oh, I know they're part of the organization, I've never met them in person.
Right, exactly.
So this is all about really creating that society, creating that group of individuals that will specifically and consciously grow to begin initiatives to help make a positive impact on this world. And we so desperately need it. And we need the camaraderie these days too. As close as we are, we're so divided. So, again, like I said, I'm a marketer's nightmare, but
right. Yeah. Well, I think that's great. Oh, tell me about what's the genesis of the name OnlyTen?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I
love it, by the way. I think it's a very unique name, and And so I've been curious about it ever since I've seen it, but I don't think I've ever asked you that.
I did come up with it on my own. I'm putting that out there for the next thing I'm going to say. And because it's about bringing in the first 10, and then actually those individuals will be able to invite in the next 10, and that's how we'll grow. And then so then we'll be 20, and then we'll be 30, and it's 10 members every 10 weeks. And I do 10 meetings a month. There's a lot of tens involved there, right? You get the gist. The other part of it is it also happened to help that may sound familiar. You may know of something else with the only in front of it. So for those of you who know, you know what I'm talking about. And so maybe slightly don't tell them I'm kind of piggybacking off of that recognition, though we have nothing to do with, not even remotely close. But I just thought it was a lovely happenstance, right? Like I said, I came up with the name initially, and then I was like, oh, there's that familiar, recognition.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I think that's great. Just really quick, Nicole. So Gary Spencer, who's from Birmingham over in the UK, is on here. Gary, thanks for coming in. Appreciate that. Eunice from Lagos, Lagos, Nigeria. No, it's Nigeria. So Eunice, maybe you can clarify that for me if I got it wrong. I apologize. And again, we have Eric here. So please tee up everything. I'll be jumping over to Facebook soon. So I'm just focused on LinkedIn so I can really concentrate on my conversation with Nicole right now. So if you're on Facebook, be patient, tee up comments, and I'll pop over there soon as well. So can we talk for a few minutes, Nicole, about burnout and maybe start that a little bit differently by getting some definitions on a common ground for the people. I think burnout it's a very serious issue, as you know, and as you help people with, and mental health, the even bigger category is as well. But let's if you could kind of share based on your own definition, I'm happy to share mine as well, what burnout is, and then we'll kind of get into how we can maybe help people better manage it.
Right, exactly. So, who just defined burnout, which I'll be honest with you, is kind of a comical definition for something that has existed for so long. In fact, we're just recognizing it. It's popping up in the DSM, and there's different ways to define it. I had a newsletter come out not too long ago that actually had a whole chart, which I think was super helpful. And I will say, because most people don't recognize burnout until they're already crispy, right? They've gone beyond fire. They're like a pile of ash at this point. And so when people really start to recognize burnout, it's when they are already actually starting to fall into symptoms of depression, right? Not having the energy to go on, feeling a real resistance to wanting to go to work, and just overall, like, really questioning, what they're doing there. Why are they doing this? What's their purpose? It's when it starts really burning them at the core, because we are, as humans, we're pretty strong. We're pretty resilient, especially when it's a slow simmer, right? I talk to most of my clients and I say, you don't start a job usually and immediately experience the worst part of burnout. It's been a slow simmer. It's things that you allow happen to you that go against your normal grain, whether it's a moral issue in the way the company behaves, whether it's, verbal abuse from a boss or a superior, whether it's just being made to do certain things that, again, just go against who you are, what you believe, or how you should be treated as a human. It's that lack of respect. It's that lack of value. It's that lack of work-life balance. It's one of those things, it's all of those things, you know, it happens differently for everybody. It can be simple overwhelm. There's different levels of burnout as well. But it literally can happen to anyone at any time. It can happen to people who are entrepreneurs, right? Again, it's that getting into that sort of stuck space, right? And that not being able to take another, you know, moment. And I will say, maybe that's not a dictionary definition, but like I said, who doesn't really describe it much better, right? It's basically, it's a professional phenomenon. And I'm paraphrasing here, but they say it's like a professional phenomenon where you basically no longer give a shit about work. sorry for cursing, but if I'm going to sum it up, it's, you know, you're pretty apathetic. You have, you know, really no desire, drive. Like I said, there's a lot of depressive symptoms in there. So
yeah, Eric just put a comment in here, Eric over on LinkedIn, that even simple tasks become difficult, right? So it just gets you into situations that you would normally do at the blink of an eye, that even that you begin to struggle with, right? And I know a lot of people that have struggled to get out of bed in the morning when they get so burned out and get dressed and go to work, right? So
exactly. Yeah. And it affects your personal life. It affects you on the weekends as well. And it doesn't mean that doesn't even have to be something as bad as your boss being abusive or employees, like, you know, you can have those good things and still get burned out. You know, there's no one way to burn out, you know. Burnout is an equal opportunity, you know, destroyer there. So but yeah, so that's kind of you know, sort of a looser definition of burnout, because like we've talked about, like you mentioned earlier, everybody's different, and so it's going to look a little bit different for everybody.
Yeah, you're right. Look and feel is quite different. I think it's an important issue, and this is not, as you know, Nicole, I'm saying this for the benefit of a lot of leaders that will access to this program. This is not an HR issue, okay, to the leaders out there. This is a leadership issue, and you know, Brett's definition of leadership is a lot of people say, and those that I've led say this as well, but in hindsight, they now have felt what great leadership is, and that is that you're accountable for the village, and you're accountable to make sure that not only your employees are fed, but their families are fed too, because they have a personal life that they have to deal with. So if the fisherman or the woman that's taking care of the garden in the village, if they get burned out, okay, it impacts families, right? If you as the leader need to remove somebody because of an attitude, behavior, you know, something like that, you need to help find them another job. It doesn't mean you need to spend a lot of time with it, but you need to provide them with some resources, help them find another job so that you can move on and they can feed their family, because and that just settles a lot of things. And that's the holistic part of leadership. And so a burnout is actually everybody's issue, and you don't want to be upsetting families. And that's why leaders need to really cultivate this culture and make people feel good and engage people like Nicole, for example, who can actually help with this, because not every person, me included, can help solve a burnout issue, right? But Nicole can, right? So if I run across somebody, then, you know, I send them Nicole's way, right? And so that's what I would encourage all leaders to do here. Sorry, Nicole, I always inject some leadership points in these conversations. But
perfect.
Leaders, if you don't know how to do it, HR, human resources, is not necessarily the best option, okay? You have broad access to resources, so engage people in your network and engage people that are experts, like Nicole, for example, as one example in North America, that can help people get through these burnouts before it gets too bad. Eric put another comment in about, it being a lot of people realizing it's too late, right? And so don't let it build up. What do you find, Nicole? Do you find that people, when they're calling you, is it getting really bad, or is it early signs or all types? What do you tell us a bit about that?
Most everybody that I talk to, they're already crispy critters, to be honest. Most people have been enduring it for a few years too long before they start seeking some help. And there's a bit of a stigma around burnout. I didn't buck up enough and just push through it. But that's very toxic thinking, because that doesn't help anybody, right? When you're pouring from an empty cup, you're basically pouring ash into, somebody else's cup, and it's not benefiting anybody. And that's a big type of revolution that we're having in the workplace. You're talking about leadership, which is so critical. It is definitely part of leadership's purview to make sure that employees are not burning out by really looking at their own structures and understanding what kind of environment they've created, right? And there's a lot of things that have to happen to create a good balance. And one of my company I used to work for, the way that they operated really astounded me, because it was so unique. It was not the way that most companies operated. If somebody was not performing well in the department they were in, but they knew that that person was a good employee, right? And they've always done well by the company, they would sit down with the person and say, what's going on? How can we help? And rather than firing the person, they would try to transfer them into a different department where they would better thrive, because they have people saying, I'm just not cut out for this position, right? I'm not, a manager role is not for me. I'd rather be, more back office, or whatever the situation was. And so it's things like that, like you mentioned, Brett, that leadership aspect is really important. And sometimes, what I teach, right, is for people to really understand their soul need first and foremost. That's your foundation. You can't build off of external, otherwise your house will come crumbling down eventually.
It will.
So there's sometimes that, like I said, your boss, your employees, everything lines up, the pay lines up, but you personally are not getting fulfillment. And so that's also important to recognize. And if you aren't getting fulfillment, you're not going to be providing the best value you can to that employer. And, again, but the leadership needs to sit down and have that conversation with their employees.
Right.
Again,
yeah.
This is a whole other thing I could get into, but
it is. And I know the little speech I guess before you just spoke about this, and that's a great response. Thank you for that, Nicole. I just can't emphasize it enough that the leaders own the village, right? And if you're not going to own the village, right, and we're talking about burnout specifically now, you own the burnout, right? And so you've got to take care of that person and their family, because when you do, you're going to have engagement far above HPO. You're going to have, your people are going to be with you through. If we enter a recession in the next year or so-ish, something like that, you want your people with you. So take care of them now before the storm comes, right? It's a lot easier to do it that way. Nicole, I think you and I just gave some great messages to leaders. Hopefully they will take note of this. What advice would you give to somebody that they've noticed something's not right with them, right? So maybe but yet they're afraid to admit that I'm burned out, because they might be afraid that it might be viewed negatively, and maybe their bonus will be impacted or something along those lines as well, in which case the culture probably isn't right. But nevertheless, they feel that, I just can't mention this, but something's kind of wrong with them. What would your advice be if they're feeling that way?
Well, I would tell you, you make a good point, because I had worked specifically with medical personnel, and more specifically with clinical staff, having been clinical staff myself and having burned out in the medical field, understanding what that's like, right? It's a whole different world. And so actually for nurses in particular, it's extremely hard because there is that constant, like, you just have to grin and bear it and endure it type of situation. But B, even if they do happen to admit that they're burned out, that could negatively impact their licensure. So there is a lot of pressure to stay silent, right? So if you're someone like that, if you're feeling like you have to stay silent because either you're going to jeopardize your job or your licensure, or you just don't want people to know that you are having those feelings, it's still extremely important to talk to someone about it. I always offer my services, right? Because first and foremost, I want to help people. And so even just having like an hour conversation with somebody who's not affiliated to anybody in your life, right? Somebody who it's just a little bit better than talking off into the void, right? You get some actual feedback. So anyone who might be watching that's feeling that way, you can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me. But it is crucial, because you are not just hurting yourself, you're actually hurting your family. If you have kids, you're impacting your kids, because they see it, they know, you're not being as secretive as you think you are with it. You're not hiding it as well as you think you are. And it's going to impact your job. And there's no point in going on like that. So addressing it and talking about it is definitely the first step. And so reach out to someone like myself who can, be a unbiased third party who you trust, because again, friends and family, they love you, they want to support you. Sometimes you can't share that stuff, but B, they are biased, because they have some sort of level of investment in you in some regards. So
they do. And if that bias can be conscious or unconscious, right? And so, but the fact is that it's there, okay? And so there you have it, folks. So there are a couple of really important things that Nicole just told us here, and I just want to kind of take stock here, and because I know there's a lot of people that are feeling this way. So if you think that something just doesn't feel right, this is Nicole's message. Talk to somebody about it. Don't just carry on, because there's a high probability that this is going to impact you and or others if you let it fester. It's probably not going to go away on its own. You can't swat it away like a mosquito. You've got to talk to somebody about that. In today's world, 2022, it's great because you've got digital platforms like LinkedIn that you can reach out to professionals. Nicole is a professional, right? So you can reach out, you can talk to her about that, and then you can decide how you feel about that after you have a engagement and chat with her about it that way as well. Because if you don't do this, and I understand that, and this is why I asked the question this way of Nicole, and she gave a great response. I know it's difficult to walk into your boss and say, I don't know if I'm getting burned out or not. I mean, a lot of bosses are going to then start looking to replace you if you do that. And I'm sorry to say that. Should they? No, they should not, right? But a lot of people, the reality is that it might trigger and something that might make you feel worse. So talk to somebody. That's Nicole's message. Independent. That's the other thing that she said. Talk to somebody that's kind of away from the situation of your living and work situation. And sometimes that action alone will help to start to turn you around. Just the fact that you're actually talking to somebody about that is an expert and has talked to hundreds of people about similar topics, right? That's what I do, right? So go reach out to a professional. It's well worth it to do it that way. So that's great, Nicole. Just we've got some comments kind of piling up here. We have Sean Rand, MBA, here saying Nicole knows my burnout take intimately. So want to get
that guy, what's he talking about?
Anyway, I guess the two of you would know all about that. We have let's see, Eric. Eric mentioned again. Eric, thanks for all your comments today. That he certainly felt burned out in the past, but he's in a great spot now, and he agrees with you, Nicole, that early stage detection is really important, right? Like with any big problem, if you think that something's wrong, kind of get on it early, and it's not that bad when it's in an early stage, right? And then maybe people can do something about that as well. We have Paul from Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria here as well. We've got two people from Nigeria here, which is awesome. I just love Africa. We have Teresa Herbick here from San Antonio. She says, happy Friday, Teresa. Great to have you here. And Nicole, I'm going to take the first question from the audience here, and then we're gonna have a point re-steer the discussion a little bit to women and leadership in a few minutes. But before we do that, Gary has got some things here. Do you think culture in the U.S. is any different than that elsewhere, i.e. the UK? I'm happy to help with this one if I can, Nicole, but you want to go first?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
I have learned so much working internationally. And I know, Brett, obviously you probably even more so than myself with all your years of being international and living abroad and everything like that. We share a lot of similarities, definitely with the UK. We are not as progressive as we think we are. It's one thing that I have discovered. But yeah, and there's a lot of cultural. Well, I won't say cultural similarities. I'm going to steer more towards professional, economic. Countries that was something the pandemic taught us, right? And I'm sure that you saw it. That it basically leveled the playing field for all the economies that are on the same level. Is everybody was experiencing kind of the same thing across the globe, and that was absolutely fascinating to me. How we were all kind of in the same boat in that way. So obviously cultures are going to be different across different countries, and we do things a little bit differently. But economically, a lot of different countries are starting to really level out on the same playing field. And like I said, the US is not as advanced as they like to think they are in comparison to some of our European friends, or even in, Africa. I was surprised by some of the stuff that I learned that's more progressive than we are here when it comes to dealing with our workers, providing benefits and things like that. So
yeah, I think I won't repeat a lot of what you said. Let me just try to highlight maybe some things that are different rather than waste people's time. Africa, you mentioned, Africa in many parts of Africa went straight to mobile phones. So whereas you get the US, the UK, you have this old Benjamin Franklin type of rotary dial phone, all this other stuff, right? You had the famous phone booths in London that are globally famous, the red phone booths, and that type of thing. But many parts of Africa just went straight to wireless technology. I was living in Japan in the late 90s for 6 years, and they were doing things on their mobile phones that the U.S. only started doing a few years ago. So there are some, and Korea, a lot of people in my network from Korea as well. So Korea, Japan have been technological. That's where, you got Samsung and et cetera. You get Hitachi in Japan, Toshiba, these flat screen TVs, all of this stuff. Well, this is where it originated from. So a lot of people think that, well, the U.S. developed all that. Well, they really didn't, right? And so I think that there are some differences there. And Gary, so I would say also one thing I'll point out, and then we'll move on related to your question, Gary, masks and COVID-19. having lived in Asia for a number of years, many different countries, and being in Asia during the time of SARS when that happened, and I saw Taiwan stamp out SARS because of masks primarily, right? And typically Asian culture, if people in many parts of Asia, so if you get sick with a head cold before COVID, you wear a mask out of politeness and respect for other people. And it's a cultural thing. I will tell you, in the US, you don't do that. People will look at you cross-eyed if you're wearing a mask before COVID, actually. Because I used to come home to see family and I'd wear a mask because people were sneezing on the plane because I was living in airplanes and hotels while I was in Asia. And if you wear a mask, the proper type of mask, you don't get a head cold, right? So, but I would just get looked at like there's something really wrong with this person. And I can tell you, Gary, the UK is the same way. And so is Australia. I'll throw Australia into it as well. Doesn't mean these are bad countries, but Gary, you asked the question, there's a lot of cultural differences. I can tell you that there's some parts of Asia, you go to Thailand, you go to the Philippines, and you're running into a corporate building and you jump on the elevator, and you know when the elevator's full and there's room for one more, well, they'll hold the door open for you. And then there's a handful of other countries in Asia that I'm not going to mention because I don't want to talk negative, but that are pushing that door closed because they're in a hurry to get up. They don't want to wait for you to get on the elevator. So there's a lot of, the point is, there's a lot of cultural differences. And I think the point Nicole made was there's a lot of similarities as well, in terms of the economies and some of the development. But the bottom line is that every country is different and unique, and it's just a matter of degree. And Gary has asked for you, Nicole, is the attitude to burnout any different across the globe, meaning cultural norms, or is it purely a toxic culture issue for businesses to deal with? What do you think? Is it country culture, or is it a toxic issue? What do you think?
Well, we are definitely here in the US more prone to letting ourselves burn out, right? I don't know how far back now, I don't know, but I think it was probably like 3 or 4 years ago now, there was the Cadillac commercial that came out that was really controversial because it basically talked about like how, being a true American meant really like working yourself to death to afford this thing, right? The whole hustle culture, right? That is kind of systematically being dismantled as we're moving forward, especially post-COVID. So there are more cultures willing to be more open about it, to talk about it. And again, similarly, much like the US, people really have a hard time with it. But I will say this as a human species, I have this little phrase I always use that has come from my years of working with clients, is that people are more willing to stay unhappy in the known rather than find happiness in the unknown. Right. So, yeah. And that's just kind of true for everybody.
That's powerful. I love that. And I don't love the situation of the former. I mean, I think I subscribe to the latter, but I haven't heard that before. And that's a very powerful perspective. So there's a great perspective for all of you to look at. So that's wonderful as well. Nicole, I'd like to shift just a little bit here, and Paul, if you have any questions from Nigeria, feel free to tee them up. I want to talk a little bit about how, just in your view, and it can be more of a conversation if you want, about what needs to be done from your perspective to elevate more women into leadership roles as well. And it's very different than I know Nicole knows this, but for the viewers, I'm not talking about hiring more women. What I'm talking about is appointing and hiring and retaining and developing more women in key leadership executive roles so that we can start to change the culture globally in big companies and introduce more creativity into those countries. And so, Nicole, any views on this point?
I have lots of views, but I'll try to keep it succinct.
Great. So that means you're the right person to talk to this about.
I think the best jumping off point in this conversation really comes from believing what women say, right? That is a big societal issue, cultural issue that we have. And it's not just men, women. I mean, studies have shown that men and women alike are more likely to believe what a man says than what a woman says. So you can have a completely educated woman in her field talking about her knowledge base, right? And then you could have a man with almost zero background talking about the same thing, and yet the man will be believed over the woman. And that's just a really strange phenomenon, especially since women do it to other women, you know? So I think that is first and foremost a very big issue. I've seen, I don't know if you've ever seen those memes where it is, or I don't even know memes is the right term, but stories where, you know, women will be posting, talking about something in the educational sphere, scientific sphere, especially, and, you know, then some guy will come along to tell her how wrong she is and that she needs to go read this or whatever. And the woman be like, well, yes, well, I wrote that. And, you know, women are always having to justify their knowledge base and their experience and things like that. And I will tell you, I'll give you a little secret. My husband works with me. He is my marketing manager. And so occasionally he will be typing under my name. And since he's been working with me, he has found out how frustrating it is to be a woman, because things that he is talking about from a place of knowledge and expertise, men will come back and not criticize, but critique, or, you know, tell him in different ways how he's wrong. And he's over there getting so frustrated because it's under my name. And
absolutely. And you're a woman. That's right. And there's the unconscious bias. Now, I'm not going to say it's probably mostly unconscious, but that if I were betting, I'd say most of that unconscious bias, males doing that.
And like I said, I can't even put it on men. I'm guilty of it as well. And it's just this weird phenomenon. How are we trained? How do we untrain ourselves from that space, right? And then of course, all the other stigmas that go along with women being too emotional, although everything you and I have talked about, that actually could be very beneficial, because, you know, a book that I've been working on for way too long is called Why Employment is Like Dating and Why You Should Care. Because we're humans in a company. Just because it's a professional space, everybody brings the same emotions and things into that space. And so it's very much a relationship-based world, despite having professional, despite the fact that we have to wear, you know, fancier clothes or whatever, or maybe put up a wall, there's still all those emotions involved. And so that could be really good. At the same time, I'm not saying that all women are great. There are some really mean and manipulative boss ladies out there.
I get your point. Yeah, I get your point. Yeah. What do you think men, in your view, should do? Is anything top of mind to start to change this? Because that's really what it boils down to, Nicole, because the numbers are so out of whack worldwide. I mean, some places are far worse than others, right? Men need to mobilize on this particular issue. I've done it. Those of you that know me, a lot of women will see this in Japan, and they'll know that we went from 2 or 3 females to more than half in 18 months in a country where you can't fire anybody. So we had to reappoint men, and that's so if it can be done there by someone like myself, it can be done easily in the U.S. and in Canada and in the U.K. and Australia. So there's a message there. Nicole, what do you think men could do to better move this forward?
Well, I think first and foremost, men need to realize how important they are in this role, right? And when it comes to anything regarding women's issues, it's not an attack, right? It's never an all men type of situation. It's more like, hey guys, we need you to get these guys under control, whether it's professional sexism, or whether it's something as bad as getting into some of the sexual crimes and things like that. It is the responsibility of men to not make this okay. And I will say a big part of this stems from the way that men talk to each other about women. If locker room talk is okay and normal, if women are looked at and talked about as objects to be conquered, then we're never going to make any progress professionally. And really, that's the base of it. That's the crux of it. And it has to be when a guy comes and talks to you in that locker room setting and starts saying some things, it's just got to be shut down. Like, that's just not okay.
Step up and just because it's been talked about maybe in the past, you can put an end to it, men, when this does happen, right? Because there is a lot of this out there, and a lot of it, again, I keep coming back to unconscious bias. It's just because maybe it's natural for people to do this, but it's so demeaning. And, the issue is, and I can say this having worked in pretty much everywhere in the world except for Latin America, South America, and Central America, I can tell you that your profits and performance will improve when you do this, okay? And the reason why they improve is that women, it's been proven, women are more creative than men in general, right? And so you want, and you know what happens when you hire a leader, then and that leader's more creative, they're going to hire a more creative team. It doesn't mean that they'll just hire all women, right? We're not saying that. What we're saying is that they will look at the situation through a completely different set of eyeglasses than what a man would in general. And there's some exceptions to that, right? But that's what I've observed. And I've observed this, back to Gary's point, this has been standard. It's really interesting across all cultures, all countries where I've worked. This gender focus on appointing more women in leadership, it's had the same outcome everywhere, Nicole. It's been amazing. There's no difference, no matter where it's been. So I think you're right. So cut out the locker room talk. If it will happen, and if it does happen, be that person, be that leader to say, hey, this really isn't right. Let's not talk about this, and start to do what you can to change this kind of behavior, right? Because it does matter to everybody that way. I think that's really great. Nicole, we're getting a little short on time. We've got a couple minutes left. I've mentioned a couple times on this program that we might be entering a bit of a choppy economy. It might be a recession. I'm not an economist. I'm not going to predict it, but I leave that to the experts. But Bank of America in the United States, Nomura 2 weeks ago, Nomura in Japan, they have both said the U.S. In a year may hit recession. Nomura even went so far to say, for the global audience, that the UK, South Korea, throw them in the boat as well. So I don't know what will happen, but what I do know is that there's a war going on in Russia, in Ukraine. Russia, it may widen. I don't know if it will or not. The point is, there's a lot of pressure everywhere in the world that wasn't there when COVID happened. So I'm bringing this up. and I have the following question, Nicole. Networking. You help people network. You've talked about what OnlyTen does and what you do as well. In periods of turbulence, could you just share your perspective on how people should view networking?
It's so important. It's so critical. I think just culturally for the future, it's vital, because you talk about the economy, right? And we are actually now, thanks to technology, to the modern technology, we're very much a small world, right? And people talking about an upcoming recession, well, the more you talk about it, the more people get nervous, the more that big investors start pulling out and start locking down with their money. And then what happens here affects what happens in Japan. And we're just, because we're so widely connected anymore, it's super important to be more connected and understand more. We talked a lot about just culturally, internationally, economically, internationally, and that's how I see the future, to be honest. Is that what the struggles that we are having right now aren't because of technology, it's because we are able to get closer with our faraway neighbors, right? And we're in this whole new 180 period of development. We've got so much change happening. I know that you're getting to the end on time here, but it's critical.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Network. Yep. Network, connect, learn, grow, be open. Change is going to happen whether you like it or not. So
And this is 2022. This is still in the pandemic era economy, hopefully getting towards the end of that. Don't know, but maybe entering another storm as well. Take this advice that Nicole is giving you. Put networking as one of your top activities, okay? And you can also reach out to Nicole because she can help people. That's a big part of what OnlyTen, of what she does actually, is she can help you network as well. So that's very important, and it's going to become even more important when times get choppy. And I've been talking a lot this week about the fires coming, the hurricanes coming. You know, there is a storm brewing out there. I hope it doesn't hit. But right now, when the sun's out, folks, is the best time to start laying the groundwork and the best time to build your network, to talk to people like Cole about the proper way to network as well, to get while you still have a job, get your CV and resume updated, get your USP in place. And I didn't forget about that in the intro. There's a great post today. All of you need to see that Nicole did. And Nicole, this is a challenge for you. In 30 seconds, summarize the post that you made today on LinkedIn, because I think that's so important that people understand it's more than a piece of paper, what they need to count on, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we'll finish with that, then we'll sign off. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's all about selling yourself, guys. And what I liken it to is, remember when you would get a toy, right? You get a toy for Christmas, and let's say it's a little bit more complicated. What was the most boring part of that toy? It was the instructions. Nobody reads the instructions first, I think, except for my mother, who reads them cover to cover. But you want to play with the toy, right? But when you look at a company hiring a new employee, you're the toy. So you got to think of yourself that way. Think of yourself that way when you're writing a resume. Your resume is your instruction manual. So how are you going to make that interesting? How are you going to make it pop? How are you going to make them want to buy you as a toy, right? And I'm doing just quick simplification for you, but that's really, that's the mindset you need to get into. You know, look at yourself as a toy amongst millions. How are you going to make yourself stand up and market yourself that way?
Yeah, and it's amazing. And the reason why, Nicole, you are posting about this day and talking about it with a lot of people is that a lot of people aren't doing it. So folks, if you can just embrace this advice, you might get on the inside track. Okay. And this is an example she's giving you anyway, you need to see her post. It's like a 7-minute video. It's well worth the time, less than 10 minutes to get a job. Hey, that's pretty good deal here, and that part's free. So So take that advice, but you've got to get that 15, 30-second elevator pitch on what is unique about you. Can you deliver that's probably not on the resume? So that's what one of the things I used to look for in hiring people. I a lot of times hired for attitude, right? And sure, you got qualifications, right? And you tick the boxes. You got to get through ATS and all of this. But job seekers, understand this post that she made today about your unique selling proposition, and focus on that, and think about that toy, right? Who wants to read? People don't have time. I tell you what, when I was hiring people, and I've hired, I don't know, hundreds of people, 30 years. I've never counted how many people I've hired, but if somebody gives me a long resume of 7 pages, and somebody can give me something with 2 pages, and I'll consider both of them. But when I'm talking to them, I'm just going to ask them both the same question, and tell me in 30 seconds. One of the questions will be, tell me in 30 seconds why you think you're the right one for this job, and then I'll tell you why I think we're the right organization for you. And if one person is not able to answer that, they're probably a no. So this is really how it's how it operated when I did it, how it operates in 2022. So take this advice. Nicole, we're out of time, but what's the best way for people to reach you, the very best way?
Honestly, LinkedIn, right? That's kind of where I live, is on LinkedIn. You can type in Nicole Rand, I should pop up, or I'm Not Toast, at I'm Not Toast. That's me. I'm all over the place. Honestly, that's the best way to reach me.
We'll emphasize LinkedIn. I'll put that in the comments when we do a repost over the weekend of this discussion as well. Nicole, thank you. I know we kind of hurriedly got through some really important, deep subjects, but I think we pretty much delivered what we promised. And folks, for those of you watching live, thank you for taking the time to tune in live. Really appreciate that. And for those that will see this on replay, please tee up anything that you'd like to have a dialogue with Nicole and or myself about. Please follow Nicole. Please engage her. Tell people about her. If you have noticed somebody that might be struggling with burnout or an issue, you're not going to, maybe they won't admit it's burnout, but there are professionals there that can help. There's job seekers out there. Great tips like the toy analogy. Trust me, this can make the difference. When you get your resume and your profile done, you got to do that. But it's only hygiene, in my opinion. There's a lot more to it than that. You've got to prepare for the interview. And before that, you need to network. So there's a whole thing there as well. So please engage with Nicole. She's a professional. She helps people. She's seen hundreds, maybe thousands of situations. And a short conversation would probably be well worth your time if that would save you 6 months, right? Especially with the storm brewing of a recession. Yeah. So that's where right now is the time, not just with Nicole and what we're talking about today, but right now before the storm comes in. Prices are rising too with everything. So eggs are up 32%. You want to take action now before it gets worse, right? And that's really what the point is. Always make hay when the sun shines, as somebody once famously said. Thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate that. I'll be back next week with a very special guest. I'll do the intro sometime early next week. And I'd like to wish everybody a great weekend from around the world that sees this. And Nicole, thanks again. Appreciate it.